Well, the Leader of the House has to liaise between the government and Parliament. So this involves proposing the sequencing for bills, for parliamentary questions, also looking to see what needs prioritization. How does it impact Parliament? Well, it impacts Parliament in the sense that clearly Parliament needs to handle the issues which are of the most importance of the day. So prioritizing is a key thing because it enables the public to understand an issue that may be on the public mind, or if it's a bill, prioritizing a bill makes sure that a policy gets done by a certain deadline so that the policy can take effect. The leader has to work closely with both the Speaker and the Whip because, for example, the Whip would be collating the names for who speaks on certain motions. I need to know how many people are speaking in order to decide which bills to prioritize. And we also have to work with Speaker because we need to submit the list of legislation to Speaker or the sequencing of various agenda items. So there needs to be close, how does one put it? You need to have a good working relationship so that each of the three of us understand, where we're coming from and try to make sure that Parliament's business gets proceeded with smoothly. When the MPs file their questions, I have to look at the questions and propose a sequencing, which is then submitted to Parliament, and then Speaker will look at it, and if he agrees, then that's the sequencing. If he doesn't agree, then he may, change the sequencing. So you basically have to do that first cut of work to propose it, and part of that includes identifying what are the important issues or the ones that need prioritization. So every Parliament sitting, there are certain items. One will be the parliamentary questions. This is when the backbenchers file questions and the ministers have to answer. So that's one batch of things, and clearly some things will be more topical than others. So I would have to look at it and propose to the Speaker, and the Speaker, of course, ultimately has the final say on the sequencing. That's one. The second thing would be the legislative agenda, which are the bills. So for every sitting, you will see that various ministries will have bills that are put up for debate. And bills go through 3 readings. The first reading, second reading, third reading. The first reading is the introduction of the bill. The second reading is where you debate the bill. And the third reading follows very soon after the second reading, where they basically confirm the bill. So one of the things that I have to look at is liaise with the ministries to see how many bills are coming up for the next sitting. Because if it's a 2-day sitting and you have 14 bills, you're not going to be able to finish it all, right? So you might have to space out either that, or we may have to say increase the number of days of sitting. So that is something that I have to look at, and I work with the Whip, I work with the various ministries to try and make sure that the number of days within the number of days allocated, we can complete the parliamentary agenda. And here you also have to take into account that there may be motions filed, there may be adjournment motions, and sometimes there may be ministerial statements. So these are different types of things on the parliamentary agenda, and I have to work with the Whip to make sure that we can clear all of this in the allotted sitting days. I think the key thing to remember is that Parliament is the platform where we decide policies, where we decide the direction that government and Singapore goes in. That's one big bucket, right? So for the budget, for example, the budget has a whole range of policies which have a huge impact on people's lives. So you must remember that that's one area of impact. But then there's also another area where things may happen which need explanations. And if something is urgent and requires an urgent explanation, then I have to see how to prioritize that, because the public would have questions, the public may have concerns, and therefore, when you ask how would it impact, right? It has an impact on public reaction, on whether you can give the public assurance about certain things, and whether you can you schedule it so that the public has an early explanation on what has happened. I mean, the whole of Parliament is about public accountability. The role of the leader is to make sure that as we do all of those things, to have proper sequencing, to make sure that we are able to table the things that need to be tabled for this sitting. There may be some times, for example, when a bill is not particularly urgent, and if we only have like 2 or 3 days and there are a lot of bills, then I might have to ask certain ministries, can you defer to the next sitting, so that at least we can space it out. It's not so much plans or intentions, because it's not like the leader sets what Parliament says or does, right? So, and this is just for the benefit of those who are not familiar with how Parliament works. On the parliamentary question side, it's really the backbenchers who are filing. So that's very much in the hands of the backbenchers as to what is raised. Then, as far as the bills are concerned, it's very much dependent on the ministries or the various ministers, what bills they want to bring in, their government bills. But occasionally, we have backbenchers bills. So that's not for the leader to decide who brings what, right? But I think that the key thing is this. When these things are raised and brought up, then my role is to look at that and make sure that they're properly sequenced, that there is space and room for the different agenda items. And also, of course, there's a third area, which is MPs' conduct in Parliament, and making sure that, as far as our Parliament is concerned, we have substance, we observe procedure, and also that there is a high quality in the debate in Parliament. Being an MP is a privilege, and we do have the Parliamentary Privileges and Immunities Act, right? And what that act does is it confers certain privileges on MPs, for example, to be able to speak freely without fear that proceedings may be brought against you. You have that privilege. But when you have that privilege, one must be very careful to exercise a privilege responsibly. So it is very important not to mislead, very important not to lie in Parliament, very important that what you say can be substantiated. And if that is not followed, then it is necessary to call that into question and have that dealt with. So that's one area. There's another area, which is that in Parliament, of course, because you're with peers and speakers in the chair, there's a certain decorum which allows you to debate properly. So you will notice, and not everybody follows this, but the convention is when you refer to somebody else, right, another MP, you should either say the member for such and such constituency, or you should say Mr. So-and-so. One should really try to avoid saying you. You said this. You always refer to the speaker and say, Mr. Speaker, the member for so-and-so has raised this question. And why do we do that? It sounds very arcane, like, old-fashioned, right? But there's a reason and purpose behind it. The reason is to take out that personal element, because the moment you say, you said this, then it becomes very adversarial. And you're trying to keep the environment one where you can have an orderly debate. And so the idea of the speaker in the chair is that you have a third party that is overseeing, moderating, making sure things are in order, and try to take a little bit of the heat out of it so that you can focus on the substance. And then there's yet another area, which is in the chamber, you have people who know what you're saying and can rebut, etc. But there have been occasions where MPs, when they come out of the chamber and either post on social media or give interviews or make other public statements, there have been 1 or 2 instances where what happened was not accurately represented. And that is a cause for concern if that happens, simply because it then may give people the wrong impression of what was said or what was done in the chamber. And there were a couple of occasions when I had to deal with that to make sure that that was corrected. I don't anticipate a very large change, but much will depend on how MPs raise things and what they say or do. So for example, if everybody decides to overrun their time on speeches, I will definitely have something to say about that because we want to keep things moving, right? But if everybody keeps to their timing, does things efficiently, productively, there won't be a need for me to step in. I think by and large, our rules have a certain flexibility within them that can accommodate changes. So at the moment, I say at the moment because it still remains to be seen, right? At the moment, I think the rules are serviceable and have been able to cover what they needed to cover. So it's only if a situation arises that we see that the existing rules either insufficient or not, they don't meet the occasions which rise, then might have to change. But for now, I think it's okay, then we'll see how it goes. I would say it was a combination of things. One part of it was the pandemic, because there were some very urgent things that had to be done. Some were bills, but most of it was actually approving the various budgets or having to answer questions about various things. And there were more filings of PQs as well as of motions. So that was one area. Then the other area, I suppose, is really that more parliamentary business was brought up. That's really more of the motions, backbencher motions, because the things that take the most time will be debates. You can have debate on a bill, and a bill, in order for a bill to be moved, let's say it's a government bill, the minister must move the bill. He stands up and says, I beg to move that this bill be passed. Then you have a debate. The same thing is true of a motion. When you have a motion, you're basically asking Parliament to decide on your motion, whatever your motion is, right? And in order to decide, there has to be a debate. Some topics don't have so much interest, so you have fewer speakers. But many of the motions have a lot of interest, so there'll be many speakers. And that was actually what contributed to the length of time in the last Parliament. Firstly, because I think there were more motions, and secondly, there were quite a lot of speakers on the increased number of motions. Well, it only impacts it in the sense that I have to figure out how to make sure that all of this gets cleared within the allotted sitting days. And sometimes, in order to do that, I've had to extend the time. And we had a few cases where we went very late into the night, and I think one, if not two occasions, where we crossed the midnight mark. You know, you don't have to have very long extended hours to ensure that there is high quality of debate. It's really a question of how efficient and productive we can be without, at the same time, sacrificing the amount of the ability of the MPs to raise points. So I think it's a two-way process. One, I hope that the MPs bear in mind that it is possible to convey your key messages and your key points without having to have very, very long speeches. In fact, the most effective speeches are the ones that are somewhat shorter, because people actually, attention span, right, is limited. I mean, even the way we consume information now, we scroll, we flick, right? Very rarely do we sit through something and listen to something for hours on end. So good, effective speeches would be preferred. So that's one thing. The second is when we answer the questions, I think certainly the ministers answering the questions can also keep them concise, and then then allow the MPs to raise clarifications. So you don't have to be long to be effective. The government MPs definitely raise questions and file motions, but I think it's fair to say that in the last term of Parliament, where there were two main opposition parties, there were questions from them, and they also raised motions, which added to the timing. There's nothing wrong with filing more things, provided it's relevant, and also provided that we keep to the point. and we dispose of the parliamentary business effectively. I think that's the key thing. What you don't want is somebody raising something and then repeating the same point many times. And then it just becomes, not the best use of time. Or asking questions to which answers have already been given. That's not a good use of parliamentary time, and it's not good use of public time either, to be watching the same thing asked many times when an answer has already been given. There are different ways. I mean, one, you can do it informally, of course, because if it's just one or two MPs. But if you notice a certain trend or a pattern, then I might put out a note, for example. And then, of course, if it's very egregious, then I might have to intervene in Parliament and either make a specific request, issue a note of caution, or in very extreme cases, make a referral to the Committee of Privileges, which hopefully in this term, we can avoid things like that. Carrying on with that's really at the Prime Minister's discretion, because he appoints. And in this case, he'd asked if he said he'd wanted to appoint me again, and I'm quite happy to, accept the appointment to assist. So that's fine, because I've grown into the role, I suppose, in the last term. I think one of the things that I have come to learn in this role is why there's a reason why the standing orders are drafted the way they are. There's a reason why the Parliamentary Privileges and Immunities Act is drafted the way it is. And remember, these rules and that legislation were all drafted a long time ago. They have been amended, right, but along the way, or refined along the way. But it actually tells you that certain behaviors tend to continue throughout, and there's a reason for them. So, for example, parliamentary questions. The standing orders require them to be short and sharp, and this allows for the answer to be given and then clarifications. So you also set a limit on the number so that there's time for other people to ask questions, and there's opportunity for different ministries to have the opportunity to answer. So there's a reason for this. And it's very important as leaders to understand the fundamental underlying reasons for the rules, because if you're just following rules in the abstract or without understanding the reason, then you're not able to guide effectively, and you cannot you need to be able to explain to the MPs why this rule is the way it is and what is the objective that we are trying to meet. Not at the present time, but we'll have to see. A lot depends on what happens in Parliament. In the last Parliament, I had to do more interventions, I think, than the previous leader had to in previous parliaments, but that was just because of the nature of what happened in the last term of Parliament. So we'll have to see what happens going forward. But I would say this. What I would really like for this Parliament is for the public and internationally, the international audience, to see that the quality of our debates in the Singapore Parliament is high quality, that the way we dispose of parliamentary business is not just efficient, but substantive and impactful. And also that the way that we conduct ourselves, the propriety and the decorum is exemplary. Because Parliament is the people's representatives meeting at a place and at a time, discussing things which are of importance to Singaporeans. And Singaporeans are watching this, but so is the international audience. So it's very important that as representatives of the Singaporean people, we should be able to hold ourselves to a certain standard, debate to a certain standard, and command both respect as well as understanding from people as to why we're doing what we're doing, and hopefully people look at that and say, well, the Singapore Parliament is something that we think is conducted well, and is a good example of what a parliament should be. as I've mentioned before, making sure that the rules are observed, making sure that the MPs understand why the rules are the way they are, and when the rules are overstepped, to raise that, and if necessary, seek direction from the Speaker, but basically to put front and foremost in MPs' minds that we represent the people and we must represent them well. High quality debate is one where the issues are identified clearly so people know what you're debating, where what's at stake is also crystallized so people know what are the implications of either the outcome of this motion or the outcome of the bill, where you're able to persuade, especially if you're government and you're bringing a bill, and some bills are very easy. It's people look at it and that, yes, of course we should do this. But some bills are a little bit more difficult because there are differing views. They may be controversial. So that ability to explain why, to persuade people of the need for this, and to be able to carry the ground. That is high quality debate. I think what we wish to avoid is what we see in some other parliaments where the debates are purely performative and people are saying things either because it's popular or because you get a good soundbite, but is it really coming to grips with what is of importance to Singaporeans and to Singapore? Good substantive debate does not always make good theatre. And I think we have to be mindful of that. And what we must make sure is that in our parliament, we always have good, substantive, high-quality debates where Singaporeans understand why, what's at stake, and are able to appreciate the outcome. And on the government side, if the government is moving the bill or moving a policy, it's very important then to do all the groundwork beforehand to really be in tune with what people are thinking, feeling, needing, and be able to explain why we think that this policy or this bill will address that. I think we see flashes of it now and again, and I don't think that is something that we would want to become the norm. And of course, in some other parliaments, it goes beyond just that. It actually ends up in physical altercations, and that's definitely something we don't want in our parliament. Singaporeans, by and large, are actually a very sophisticated electorate. And if something is explained clearly, they do get it. They do. So the first challenge is explaining things clearly and crystallizing the issues. I think the second big challenge is that many of the things that we do are complex. If you're trying to explain reserves, for example, we've had a few debates on that, right? It's a complex issue. The fundamentals underpinning it are simple, which is that you have fiscal prudence, that everything that, land has a value. We don't just give away land for no reason. But when you go through all of this, you have to do it step by step because there are many different moving pieces and people need to understand each piece to understand how it all operates. So our biggest challenge in Parliament is how to convey what is essentially a very complex issue, break it down in a way that is easy for people to understand so that people can see why we are doing or something or why a policy is the way it is. Okay, so when I say that Parliament shouldn't be theatre, it doesn't mean that Parliament shouldn't be interesting. Parliament should be an interesting place. It should be a place where people have interesting speeches, where you have interesting anecdotes. But I think you don't want Parliament to be a place where things are said for the sake of saying it, for the sake of shock value, or just to sound good, without actually addressing key substantive issues. So in some other parliaments, for example, where somebody breaks out into song or breaks out into doing some physical movements, etc. Not really necessary, I would think. And also sometimes in some parliaments, there's how shall we put it? There's a lot of there's toing and froing, right? But does it really answer the key issue that is on people's minds, or is it a matter of just trying to make yourself look good or trying to make the other side look bad? I think these are things that we have to watch out for. We do have to keep our eye firmly on the substance and make sure that we are talking about and addressing the things that are of importance to Singaporeans and how we can take Singapore forward. So it shouldn't be performative. There's nothing wrong with standing up and talking about all the things you're passionate about and doing so in an interesting manner. I think what is important, just as it is for any other speech on any other platform, is to make sure that what you say is substantiated, make sure that what you say genuinely reflects what's on the ground, and make sure that what you propose or suggest has value.